Hello, and welcome to HBW-TV. I'm your host, Sulin. Today, we're at Equatorial Hotel Penang, and we would like to welcome Professor Selvam. He's a dean at an American school with special interests in general medicine and psychiatry. Having worked in Europe and Asia, he has research experience in both the pharma and hospital industries. He's also the dean of a medical faculty, and today we'll be discussing mental health issues. Professor, when you say health, what do you think is health in general?
I think it's a very interesting question. A lot of people think health is a simple definition of absence of an illness. That's not so. The WHO definition clearly states that complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and it's not merely the absence of an illness or infirmity. So you're looking at three levels where a person has to be healthy. One is physical health, the other is mental health, and the third one being social health.
You mentioned mental health. Coming from a psychiatrist, what do you mean by this?
Well, I think it's one of the toughest questions to answer, because generally when you say mental health, the immediate picture that jumps to one's mind is of a person, if you say he doesn't have good mental health, you'll expect them to be running around the streets, with a torn shirt, or with some kind of severe abnormal behavior, or somebody who's sat in a corner. That's the kind of picture anyone will get. But mental health covers a very wide area. Like I think in our earlier conversation I said, even nail biting. If you see, some people will bite their nails until there is very little left, and with sore fingers to a point. Now even that can be considered as a mental health problem. So it's a broad range of conditions which can fit into that description. But simply putting it, for a general opinion, is when a person's functionality is affected, then you have to question whether there is a mental health problem. Children refusing to go to school refusal is a mental health problem. Now that can come to an adult as frequent leave takers, medically ill. If you find this person is absent from work quite regularly on a medical leave kind of basis, now that's similar to school refusal. Now that's a mental health problem. And somebody who is depressed, who can't face the world, is a mental health problem. Now somebody who can't eat in public, that's social phobia. That's a mental health problem. So to define, it's rather quite difficult, because there are about 300 different types of mental health problem that's coded in the manual as officially recognized problems.
You mentioned about mental illnesses and mental health and how these two are related. At what point can we consider someone to be having a mental illness, and how do these usually develop?
Okay, interesting question again. It's not an easy question to answer, because there is a tolerance level that goes along with most of these conditions, and I'll explain how and why later. The first part, the mental illness, it is a condition where generally it's characterized by just not one thing. So there are a combination of things that goes along into identification of a mental illness. And this will be in the form of presentation of abnormal thoughts, perceptions, emotions, behavior, and even certain things that affects the relationships with people close to him, or even the people in the community. So it's a combination of events that goes towards the actual identification of the type of illness. For example, some may think mental illness, like I said earlier, has to be drastically or dramatically exhibited, and it may not be. I'll give you an example to demonstrate this. You've seen some people sat at the dining table falling asleep, or sat in a meeting and falling asleep. And the same person goes to watch a movie which everybody says is exciting, and within 2 minutes they fall asleep. Now you would think that the person is tired, but actually if you look into the statistical manual, the DSM or the ICD, it can be classed as a mental health problem under sleep disorders. The thing is, if these people are disengaged directly for more than a couple of minutes, they have a tendency to fall asleep. So it becomes a sleep disorder. So Definition, of course, is important. The second thing is the conditions that go into identification of the illness. But the third part is the most important. All these abnormal behavior, emotions, demonstration of other things must be adverse to the cultural conditions and belief system. For example, let's say a person says he sees ghosts. In Asia, here, I think we all accept.
Yeah.
And
quite a common thing.
It's a common thing. I mean, you saw a ghost on the way and everybody will come to you and say, you saw a ghost, tell us about it. It's a topic conversation. And then it just dissipates. Maybe the person comes down with a fever and then he says, I walked past this haunted house or haunted tree and I think the fever is because of that. And if you come to a doctor and say, okay, that's a belief system, but we'll still treat your fever. And if it is a bad fever where it lingers on, then we're going to do some tests to make sure it's not something more serious. Yeah. But we do not call this person mad. We just accept his story. Now, if he recovers from the fever in a couple of days, but then goes on remembering this ghost incident and he says this ghost is now affecting his life, it's affecting his functions, he can't leave the house because he feels the ghost is still there, it's shutting the doors and it's making him forget things. Now, this is the beginning where we have to be a bit thoughtful and say, is this true or not? Yeah. So the first part we accept because culturally we accept. The second part is its affecting his functionality. Now that becomes a problem and that's where the classification starts.
I see. Given that it's a very regional thing in some sense, that we believe in ghosts in Asia and maybe in the West they don't, what is the overall general cause or the reason that mental health illnesses can develop?
Let's look at this question in a different way. What are the causes for mental health problems? One, I would say we have to look at the genetic download. If there is a history of mental health problems in the immediate family, now that's definitely going to have an overlay for certain types of mental health problems. You see that certain things run in the family because A, it could be conditional learned behavior, or two, that there is a gene. Of course, now psychiatry has gone into a gene theory as well. The genes can be downloaded from one of the parents, and then there could be a genetic download. The third thing is, of course, their exposure to stress. All of us are built the same way, more or less, and the thing that's different is we all have different tolerance levels to stress. So some people have this attitude of, in here and out there, and you find that these people will survive in all conditions. I say similar to a cockroach, you can't kill a cockroach. It will somehow survive. So they can go through a lot and still be dismissive and survive. And there'll be somebody who breaks a cup.
And they'll break down.
And they will break down and they will go on thinking, why did I break this cup? Yeah? And I normally don't break cups. How can I be so careless? So that becomes an issue. So to say genetically is a very important thing. That is stress levels and of course the social environment, because that's a huge impact that can have on stress levels as well. So there are a number of things that can contribute, that can accelerate or decelerate the mental health problems. To decelerate is an example I'll give you. People with a lot of good family support, who are supportive and who are there, like a shoulder to cry on and a ear to download your problems. You find that these people are a bit more stronger because they have a backup. Good family support is very essential in this case. So this is how it decelerates. So somebody who can easily trip into depression or anxiety because of the good family support can withstand that. Even though they are anxious in personality, they do not become symptomatic. They rather they understand they are a bit anxious, but with the family support, they can get along, no issues. So again, these are the issues that can affect, accelerate or decelerate the condition.